The hidden world of business, where betrayal, secret millions, and criminal schemes reign, is just the beginning of this story. The protagonist, Logan Johnson, seemingly an ordinary man, dives into a dark world full of surprises and dangers. Love, trust, and family bonds in his life turn into a deadly game where every move could be his last. Behind mysterious partners, hidden cameras, and stashed money lies much more than meets the eye. Want to find out what a person is capable of when betrayed and forced to seek the truth in a world where no one can remain honest? Hey friend, welcome to my channel. And before you listen to this story, subscribe to my channel and put your most powerful like. My name is Logan Johnson, though it's only one of several names I'll soon reveal. My early years were unremarkable. I finished school with average grades and entered a state college. There, I chose marketing as my major, and after graduation, I started a career in sales, discovering I had both a talent and a genuine passion for it. After 10 years, I climbed to the position of head sales manager at a mid-sized regional company. My finances were stable, as I remained single, and it was around this time that I met Penelope Perez. Penelope was divorced and raising her 11-year-old daughter. We quickly fell in love, and less than a year after our first date, we got married. She owned a small real estate agency, which, according to her, had come from her ex-husband. Only later did I find out that the business wasn't inherited. It was part of their divorce settlement. The first few years of our marriage went smoothly. I was genuinely committed as a husband and stepfather. Since I had decided not to have my own children, having had a vasectomy at 28, the role of father suited me well. Penelope, too, decided against having more children, as she had undergone a tubal ligation after her daughter's birth. So the issue of children wasn't a concern for us. However, we couldn't foresee the financial difficulties that soon arose: a recession, a pandemic, and another economic downturn. Her real estate business was on the verge of collapse, but somehow Penelope managed to keep it afloat. She found a silent partner whose identity remained a mystery, even to me. This secrecy began to eat away at me from the inside. Every time I brought up the mysterious partner, it led to a quarrel, which usually ended with me sleeping on the couch. Penelope's response was always the same: "He wants to remain anonymous. If I tell you who he is, then he's no longer anonymous, right?" Her refusal to trust me was driving me crazy. How could she, my wife, hide such things from me? Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and turned to my best friend Michael for help. We had been friends since elementary school, and he always had my back. Fortunately, he had an idea. Michael owned an auto parts store, and after a series of burglaries, his insurance company insisted on a security system. He purchased a sophisticated system from a local spy equipment store and discreetly installed cameras in his store. He quickly managed to catch an employee who was coming in at night. Michael suggested using a similar approach in my case. Since I didn't work at Penelope's office and only visited occasionally, I didn't have a key. But I knew where she kept a spare key at home. When she mentioned a 3-day mortgage convention, I realized this was my chance. I waited until her secretary closed the office for the night, then went inside. I carefully placed cameras in strategic locations, one in her office, another in the reception area, and another aimed at the parking lot. The cameras were motion-activated, recording video and sound, and sent the footage to a site I could access any time. It didn't take long to get results. The day after she returned, I logged into the site to review the recordings. Everything started off as usual. Penelope was going about her work, sitting at her desk, answering calls and sorting through documents. Around 5 in the evening, she closed the office. The secretary left, and she stayed, waiting by the door. Shortly after, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped a tall, muscular black man with a sports bag. I recognized him immediately: Luis "Daddy" Rodriguez, a former college football star who had made the All-American team as a tight end. His promising career derailed after he was arrested with a large quantity of illegal substances shortly before his senior year. He served 7 years but was released after 4. His story was well known among football fans, including me. I would have even picked him for my fantasy team. In the recording, I saw Penelope open the door for Rodriguez, and he followed her into her office. Inside, he hugged her and they kissed. With ruthless passion, he pressed his lips to hers, his hands holding her firmly against him. They pulled apart for a brief moment, and he began unbuttoning her blouse. She smiled, encouraging him. "Your naive husband didn't suspect a thing about this little trip?" he asked, smirking slyly. "Not at all," she replied with a touch of pride. "He believed the mortgage conference story without a doubt. Thinks I'm attending a conference. In fact, he even mentioned that you seemed like a respectable man." "Respectable?" he chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Carlos Martinez, anything but a good guy. He's a key figure in the Rio Bravo cartel. His cartel is probably responsible for more deaths on both sides of the border than the Iraq War." "He certainly got fired up around me," she said with a sly smile. "The way he kept touching me all evening, I figured it out right away. I've never been with 2 men at once. It was thrilling." "So how did you meet him in the first place?" she asked, clearly intrigued. "We did time together in federal prison," he replied calmly. "Do I regret not going into pro sports? Not for a second. Operations, endless rehab, and now all these head injury issues? No thanks. This life? Way better, and there's way more money here than most players ever see." Getting down to business, he handed her a thick envelope. "Add this to the 2 million you're already holding in your safe for me. Here's another 3. By next week, I'll have the last payment I owe Carlos for the goods." "How many properties do you plan on grabbing this month?" she teased. "I was considering that apartment complex you're selling, but Carlos comes first. They're asking 1.5 million for that property," he replied. Her eyes sparkled as she clearly envisioned the commission. "Just from this deal, I'll make over 100,000, she murmured, practically seeing dollar signs. She walked over to her desk, took down a large framed photo from the wall, and revealed a hidden safe, unaware that one of the security cameras had captured the entire move. Pen in hand, I watched as she keyed in the combination. First right, then to 5, left to 25, and finally to 1. I didn't need to write it down. It was her daughter's birthday, May 25th, 2000 of the first year. Leaning back, I let the scene play out in my mind, imagining how I'd take control of the 5 million stashed in her safe. For me, Penelope Perez was already history. I had no intention of staying with a cheater. They were absorbed in each other, and I had a front row seat. They shared a final, passionate kiss before he directed her down, loosening his belt. He praised her, repeating the same empty compliments every man does. I watched them finish, then saw her head to the bathroom to freshen up. He adjusted his clothes, gave her one last look, and said a quick goodbye with a kiss. Barely 10 minutes passed before she called me at home. She said she was held up at work and too tired to cook, but offered to bring home some Chinese food. I met her at the door, helped carry the bags, and listened as she told me about her hard day. She even mentioned finally finding a buyer for that apartment complex she'd been trying to sell. I put on my best enthusiastic look, congratulating her. She was visibly tired after her supposedly busy workday and soon excused herself to take a bath. Later, I hinted at intimacy, but she brushed it off, claiming she was too exhausted. Honestly, I didn't need much convincing. The thought of her with someone like Carlos was revolting. When she fell asleep beside me in a deep slumber, I quietly slipped out of bed, my mind fixated on the 5 million in the safe. Sitting at my computer in another room, I typed in the name Carlos Martinez and began my research. Luis Papi de Rodriguez once served time for drug trafficking. He was released after 4 years and then deported. Rumor has it he's now a key figure in the Rio Bravo cartel. His path to this point has been marked by carefully calculated risks and strategic alliances. Taking that money meant testing his loyalty to Carlos, a man he once called a friend, though friendship rarely survives betrayal. I knew that as I plotted my escape, the stakes would only continue to rise. Looking back through Dedi's eyes, I remember the day I learned that Penelope Perez's real estate business was on the verge of bankruptcy. How I found out doesn't matter. What's more important is knowing who I am. I am Luis Dedi Rodriguez, but most people know me as Poppy, a nickname from my mother that stuck with me into adulthood. Growing up, I was bigger than most, and football became my outlet. I was good enough to earn a scholarship to a college in Florida, but then everything changed. My mother became gravely ill and needed urgent surgery we couldn't afford. Desperate, I agreed to a risky job with a man who promised quick money, a short boat trip to collect 50 bales of illicit goods from a larger vessel. But we underestimated the fuel required and got stranded until the Coast Guard found us the next morning. The arrest led to a 7-year federal sentence, of which I served 4 years in prison. While I was behind bars, my mother passed away, and I couldn't even attend her funeral. My closest friend became my cellmate, Carlos Martinez, a Mexican with cartel connections. The prison was controlled by Mexican inmates, and my friendship with Carlos proved invaluable. Carlos and I spent countless hours talking about his family, which he claimed was deeply involved in drug trafficking. He offered me a place in his operations when we got out, provided his uncle Miguel, the cartel boss, approved. We were released in the same month, but when I got back, Carlos had disappeared. After 2 months, I began to think his plans were nothing but empty prison dreams. Then one day, Carlos appeared on my doorstep with 2 men. He didn't waste words and asked immediately if I was ready to work. I was jobless and desperate, so I agreed on the spot. My grandmother, who had raised me, was still cleaning houses, and we were barely getting by. Carlos handed me $1,000 and invited me to dinner. At a private table in his Mexican restaurant, we discussed his business over plates of fajitas. When I tried to pay, he stopped me. "It's my place, Dedi," he said with a smile. "If you work hard, invest in legal business. That's how real success is built." I took his advice and dove into the work. Carlos's operation was as efficient as a fast food drive-through. Clients would drive up, place their order, pay, and move on to collect their package. It was all simple, precise, and astonishingly profitable. Even when the economy was down and people struggled to pay bills, demand for our product stayed high. When the pandemic hit, demand soared. People stuck at home spent their government checks on our goods, eager to escape their problems. The money finally allowed me to give my grandmother a proper burial when she passed. I moved into a luxury condominium and watched my income grow. But in this world, stability is an illusion. One day, one of our drivers was detained, and fear rippled through our ranks. Like fast food employees, our workers had their perks, too. I covered his legal costs, insured his silence, and paid his mother's rent. He took a plea deal for a year in county jail. His family lacked nothing, and his loyalty remained intact. Through all this, I earned a reputation as a man who could keep loyalty and secrets. Still, as I prepared to make my move, I sensed that Carlos and I were heading toward a final showdown that would reveal whether we were truly partners or something else entirely. I made sure every one of my people knew what I had gone through for their families. Loyalty, after all, is paramount. But in our line of work, every success makes us more visible, and rumors spread quickly. It wasn't long before a rival gang attempted to take over one of my most profitable spots. I called Carlos. Within 2 days, there was a shootout at that corner, eliminating 2 brothers who were selling directly from their car. That same night, a fire broke out in the house where their gang used to gather. 4 of their people didn't make it, and 3 others were fighting for their lives. By the next day, my team had regained control of that area. Then, 6 months ago, everything escalated. One of the factions attempted to break into our warehouse, where I kept both cash and product. My people fended off the attack, and when the dust settled, we'd lost a few of our own, but not a single one of the attackers left alive. I moved the money to my apartment and set up round-the-clock security. I was still contemplating what to do with the $15 million stashed in my spare room when one of my guys introduced me to a 19-year-old blonde college student. She wanted in on the business, claiming her sorority connections would help with product distribution. Her friends, as she said, were always looking for a new way to unwind. She asked for a loan of merchandise. I gave her a sample of a new club substance, and by morning, she was already in my bed. I immediately saw the potential to sell this together. I asked why she didn't start small, buy as much as she could afford, and gradually build up her volume. "I don't have the time," she replied. She was attending university and needed to pay out-of-state tuition within 2 weeks. She was also short on funds for dorm fees, food, and books. When I asked why her parents couldn't help, she explained. Her mother's real estate business was struggling, her father had passed away, and her stepfather wasn't about to lend a hand. Everything was on her shoulders. Either find the money or drop out of school. I said I'd give her enough product to cover her tuition expenses, and she expressed her gratitude in her own way, which I was happy to reciprocate. The next morning, I visited her mother's real estate agency. There was almost no one there, just one secretary at the reception desk. I asked to see Penelope Perez, and a woman around my age appeared. I immediately saw where her daughter got her looks. She could have been her sister, albeit with a few enhancements. I said I was interested in investing in income-generating properties. She pulled out a portfolio and showed me a shopping center that was up for sale. The previous owner had passed away, and the heirs wanted cash quickly. She also showed me photos of 3 residential buildings from a single seller, all ready to be sold. Leaning over, she pointed out each property's features with her impeccably manicured nails. I asked for the cash price for the entire package. She raised her eyebrows. "All 3 houses and the shopping center?" I nodded, smirking, as she went behind her desk, put on her reading glasses, and began tapping numbers into a calculator. A moment later, she met my gaze and said, "Just under 11 million, including commission." I suggested rounding down to 10 million in cash at the close of the deal. "Do you mean a cashier's check?" she asked cautiously. "I mean cash, as in bundles of $100 bills," I replied. She dismissed the secretary for the day, locked the door, and returned to the office, ready to discuss the deal. On one side of the room were a sofa and an armchair, with a small coffee table between them. She settled on the sofa and invited me to take the armchair. After slipping off her high heels, she stretched out her legs, revealing the lace tops of her stockings. "We need to proceed cautiously," she began. "Banks and mortgage companies won't want to get involved in the kind of deals you're aiming to make." "I'll find privately owned properties without mortgage debt," she explained. "We should establish a property management company to handle everything: acquisitions, tenant management, maintenance, and rent collection." "Great idea. Just leave my name out of it," I replied. "You'll be a silent partner. How does that sound?" she asked with a slight smile. "No one will know you're involved." She leaned forward. "If your offer is accepted, how quickly can you close the deal?" "As soon as you're ready, partner," I replied. "But I'll need part of the amount up front as a deposit. Do you have a secure place to store it?" She stood and walked over to her desk, where she removed a photo of her receiving an award, revealing a wall safe. She motioned for me to come closer, then confidently entered the combination and opened the safe. Inside were several documents. "Is there enough space for $1 million?" I asked. "Easily. If needed, it could hold 10 million, she assured, maintaining eye contact. "No one even knows about this safe, not even my husband." "If I'm going to keep my money here, I'll need the combination," I said. She picked up a pencil from the desk, wrote the combination on a sticky note, and handed it to me. I tested it, closing the safe and turning the dial, but it didn't open on my first try. "Let me help," she offered, placing her hand on mine and guiding the dial until the safe opened. I noticed her wedding ring as she leaned closer, and suddenly her hands were on my neck, pulling me into a deep, passionate kiss. That kiss stirred something intense in me. It wasn't just the moment, perhaps also the thought of the time I'd spent with her daughter earlier. I kept that to myself. As we kissed, my hands slid to her back, pressing her closer. When I started unbuttoning her blouse, she didn't resist. "Please, no marks. My husband." Her voice trailed off. We were alone for a while, until she excused herself and went to the bathroom, returning with a smile. "So, do we have a deal?" she asked. "Are all your deals like this?" I teased. She laughed. "I'll never tell." The next morning, I called her to ask if I could bring the money by after lunch. She invited me at 5, and after the money was securely hidden in the safe, we once again relived the events of the previous day. The following morning, she called to tell me the sellers had accepted my offer. That afternoon, I dropped by her office again to celebrate, and soon our meetings became routine, happening 2 or 3 times a week. On Mondays and Wednesdays, I would meet with Penelope Perez, sometimes in her office, sometimes at her home. Mondays were always unforgettable. My daughter Layla usually spent her Fridays and Saturdays participating in her sorority activities, but Sundays were always reserved for me. After a month of these father-daughter meetings, I decided to invite one of my most trusted people, Wyatt, to join us for our first extended session. Looking back, I realize it was a mistake I later regretted. Wyatt was an imposing figure, rough, intimidating, built like a professional football player. His schooling was cut short. He never finished because he ended up in a juvenile correctional facility. Years later, he served 5 years in prison for assault. Wyatt was my enforcer, the one every organization keeps on hand to keep order within the ranks. Wyatt's role was clearly defined. If someone from my team tried to pocket part of the earnings, Wyatt would have a disciplinary talk to set things right. If a courier attempted to cheat a client, Wyatt ensured it didn't happen again. Layla, however, never caused any trouble. She contributed her share reliably and didn't require close supervision. The problems began when she and Wyatt started spending time alone together. There was an attraction between them that I couldn't ignore. Wyatt's skin was a rich, dark shade, noticeably darker than mine. Layla seemed captivated by this contrast, or perhaps by his rugged demeanor. Soon, I found out they'd been meeting at a hotel during the week without informing me. I took their secret meetings as a sign of disrespect, but I held back until one Sunday when Layla didn't show up to our usual meeting. Enraged, I waited until 7 in the evening, when Wyatt came by with her earnings. He said he would deliver her package to her the next day. Realizing he'd been with her while I was waiting, I lost my patience. The next week, I sent Wyatt to meet with Carlos's team, and this too was a mistake. Layla arrived at my place around 1 in the afternoon that Sunday. Hannah, my strict and unyielding partner, answered the door and let her in. Hannah was an independent, decisive woman with dark skin and an authoritative aura. She owned a tattoo parlor and piercing studio and managed several girls on the streets, running things with a firm hand. She didn't need anyone's muscle. She handled things on her own. "Where's Daddy?" Layla asked. "He'll be back soon, just stepped out," Hannah replied, pointing to a chair. "Rum and cola, right?" Hannah poured her a drink, the ice clinking in the glass, cooling it down. After a while, under the influence of alcohol, Layla fell asleep. When she woke up 4 hours later, her scream broke the silence of the house. She burst into the living room, wearing nothing but a fresh tattoo. "What did you do to me?" she yelled, staring Hannah down. "Just a little reminder of where your loyalty lies," Hannah replied coldly. On her left breast was a tattooed heart with my name inside, and below her navel, an arrow pointing down with the word Daddy. "The next time I catch you with Wyatt without my permission, Hannah will tattoo your face," I warned her. "You're mine, and I decide who you spend time with." I ordered her to bend over the couch, and lowering her head, she obeyed. Reflecting on that day, I realized I had crossed yet another line, one I might come to regret. That couch had witnessed countless deals over the years, but none had shaken me like this one. Maybe it's all about the money. Who am I kidding? The allure of this man wasn't just in his courage. He had a magnetic energy and an enticing lifestyle that drew me in. I never thought about where his money came from. All I dreamed of was the chance to live in his world. Our meetings soon became regular, a few times a week, often at his apartment, stolen moments hidden away from the world. When he suggested we escape for a week, I came up with a plausible story for my husband to explain my absence. That week was unforgettable, like a dream I never wanted to wake up from. He introduced me to his friend Carlos, and together we experienced things I never could have anticipated. Being with two extraordinary men at once made me feel wild and free, and I wished every woman could have such an experience at least once in her life. One evening, lying in bed, I overheard them talking about their plans to seize control of Carlos's Uncle Miguel's business, describing him as too old-fashioned to adapt. They spoke calmly, even hinting at completely eliminating Miguel. Listening in, I suddenly realized I wanted to be part of this scheme. Dedi explained that I could play an important role in their business, investing profits into real estate nationwide to build lasting wealth for all of us. But for that, one obstacle had to be removed: my marriage. This felt achievable enough. We were already drifting apart, especially after my husband refused to help fund our daughter's education. Without her scholarship, she'd have had to leave school and find a job, something he even suggested. Now that her schooling was secured, my feelings for Dedi grew stronger, and my marriage felt ever more distant. Dedi started calling me by a new name, Logan Johnson. I casually told Penelope Perez that I was leaving on Sunday night to make it to a Monday morning meeting. She smiled and wished me luck, our last goodbye. Before leaving, I gathered my cameras and about $7 million from her office safe. On the way out of town, I stopped to throw my phone and laptop into a river. Earlier, I had withdrawn a small amount from an ATM, just enough to make the trip seem routine. I left my car in a rough neighborhood where a friend was waiting. I gave him cash for the car he'd bought for me, and I disappeared into the night. I left Penelope Perez and Dedi to face whatever awaited them, feeling neither pity nor concern. My recent meeting with Mr. Sanchez took an unexpectedly grim turn. There had been an attempt to overthrow Miguel, the head of the cartel. However, Carlos had miscalculated. The hitman he hired turned out to be loyal to Miguel, not him. With Carlos gone, Mr. Sanchez moved into the cartel's second-in-command position. He informed me that Carlos had confessed everything about his and Dedi's plans to take over, naming Penelope Perez as his accomplice. I didn't ask how they got him to talk, though I wondered. Carlos was buried somewhere in the northern Mexican desert. Then, Mr. Sanchez made me an offer. I could replace Dedi as the cartel's distributor in Memphis if I was willing to eliminate him and his partner. I agreed. My anger toward Dedi was too deep after learning of his and Hannah's plans regarding Layla when I met with her at a motel the following week. I warned Layla to stay clear of Memphis, to protect her from Dedi. Layla was terrified that Dedi might retaliate if he found out about us. I assured her that the cartel was already planning to deal with him, and that I'd soon be taking over the entire operation. This seemed to calm her, and we spent the night together as if Dedi no longer existed. The next morning, Layla headed off to her classes, and I returned to Memphis, ready to take on the role Mr. Sanchez had promised me. Early on a Sunday morning, she called Dedi to say she wouldn't be able to meet him, explaining that she had an urgent sorority event. Later, she mentioned that he seemed disappointed. By midday the following day, I was already at Dedi's apartment with a bucket of chicken from his favorite takeout place. The guard at the entrance, surprised to see me, stood to greet me, but didn't have time to react before I silenced him with a single shot through the empty bucket. I carefully set him back down, his head drooping forward as if he'd simply fallen asleep. Inside, another guard was engrossed in a loud TV show, barely noticing me before I shot him too, quickly leaving him on the spot. Listening closely for any signs of alarm, I made my way toward Dedi's bedroom. Through the slightly open door, I saw him in Penelope Perez's embrace, saving me from an unnecessary trip. Penelope was shouting demands at Dedi to be more passionate, but froze mid-sentence when she met my gaze at the doorway. She barely had time to react before I fired, silencing her. Dedi, panicked, tried to leap up, but 2 shots forced him back onto the bed, his shocked eyes fixed on me. "For Layla," I muttered, aiming at his groin and pulling the trigger. His cries of pain turned into desperate groans. Taking out my phone, I dialed the number Mr. Sanchez had given me and calmly informed the person on the other end that the job was done. "Wait there," came the instruction. 15 minutes later, a car pulled up to the apartment, and 3 men with Latin American features entered. One took pictures of the scene while the others searched the apartment, eventually finding nearly $2 million in a box in Dedi's closet. Mr. Sanchez counted out 100,000 and handed it to me. "This is your share. Not quite what we expected, but not bad either. Leave the bodies. The neighbors will notice once the smell begins to spread." He offered to take Layla out, mentioning a few tattoo artists who could work on her designs. I didn't ask how he knew about them. After a handshake and a promise to work together again, they left. I lingered a while longer, knowing there was one last thing to handle before I could fully take on running operations for Mr. Sanchez. I set off and went to Hannah's tattoo parlor, where, on that quiet Monday, only one client waited. Unfortunately for them, they had chosen a bad time to visit. When Hannah saw my weapon, her face went pale. "This is for Layla," I said, firing as she opened her mouth to protest. Her client screamed, but 2 shots quickly silenced him too. I emptied the cash register to make it look like a robbery, just another crime in a rough neighborhood, with a different weapon so that no trace would lead back to me. On Thanksgiving, I took Layla to New York. For Layla, it all happened suddenly and without warning. She was pulled out of her history class to be told that her mother had been found dead, in bed with a notorious criminal. Layla could barely comprehend the news, and her shock grew when she learned that this man was Dedi. She explained to the police honestly that she knew nothing about her mother's affair. Later, she shared this with Wyatt, who seemed equally shaken. He believed her mother was an innocent bystander, simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, killed as collateral in a vendetta against Dedi, who had been involved in a gang conflict the previous year. Overwhelmed with grief from her mother's death, Layla dropped out of school to handle her mother's affairs, crushed by everything that had come crashing down on her. My stepfather disappeared without leaving a single clue. The police believe he was probably killed too. They found his car abandoned in a place that, as far as I and his colleagues knew, had no connection to his work or personal life. On the day my mother was killed, he was supposed to be on a business trip. His phone and laptop also vanished. The police discovered that his last known call connected to a cell tower near Riverside Park. His body was never found. Amidst all this chaos, I decided to close the real estate business that he and my mother had built together. While clearing out the office, I discovered a hidden safe behind some furniture. Intrigued, I called a locksmith to open it. Inside, I found property documents registered to a company my mother had never mentioned. When I consulted her lawyer, I was stunned to learn that I now owned nearly $15 million in income-generating real estate. To mark the occasion, Wyatt and I went on a Thanksgiving trip, where a tattoo artist transformed the poppies on my arm into a vivid bird perched on a branch. I also reworked the heart tattoo on my left shoulder, which had once read Daddy, so that it now said Mom. I decided to keep the discovery of the safe and the properties a secret from Wyatt. I tried to convince him to leave the criminal world, warning him that we were both heading down a dangerous path, one similar to the one my mother and stepfather had taken. But Wyatt wouldn't listen. This was the only life he knew, and now he was at the top, working directly with the cartel. He felt invincible, but I didn't share his confidence. I decided to sell everything that had belonged to my mother. After paying taxes, I was left with nearly $11 million. I flew alone to the islands to relax, opened a bank account, and transferred all the money into it. I bought a beach house and now spend my days enjoying fresh seafood and fun. The locals are more than happy to show me a good time, if you know what I mean. Honestly, life couldn't be better. Taking on the name Logan Johnson, I withdrew 5 million and vanished. Now, in the summer, I fish in rivers, in the fall, I hunt, and in the winter, I ride snowmobiles. I've met a few wonderful women here, but my freedom means too much to me to get involved again with someone like Penelope Perez. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.